they're still listening to classical music, but they're not listening to it in the same way that we listen to it.
No, they don't buy CDs.
Right.
They don't even have CD players, many of them.
You know, our model of consuming it in terms of, here's a CD of Beethoven symphonies, or here's a CD of late Romantic masters. Yeah. That's not what they're doing.
It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot, and I'm not sure it's for the worse. It might be for the better.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 20. My very special guest for this episode is the great American conductor, Gerard Schwarz. Maestro Schwarz has had an illustrious career. After graduating from Juilliard, he joined the American Brass Quintet and the New York Philharmonic before moving to the podium. As a conductor, he's led a number of orchestras, most notably serving as the music director of the Seattle Symphony for over 25 years. His work now includes the All-Star Orchestra, which can be seen on PBS, and he's been the music director of the Eastern Music Festival for over a decade. Recently, while at the Eastern Music Festival, I had the great privilege to sit down with the maestro for a live interview. Over the course of an hour, we spoke about his career, and he offered his thoughts about music, including advice for conductors and on the future of classical music. He's a remarkable musician, and I'm delighted to present our conversation with minimal editing. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Garrett Hope of the Portfolio Composer podcast for supporting me on Patreon. If you'd also like to help, you can find me at patreon.com/Mark J. Connor. Now, on to the interview.
Jerry, thanks for joining me.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me.
It's really an honor to speak with you.
Appreciate that.
Could you introduce yourself? A lot of my listeners may not know of you and what you do.
My name is Gerard Schwarz. Oh, God, what do I do? It's a very complicated question. I had a career as a trumpet player, so I did that until I was 30. And then I've had a career as a conductor. And so I was conductor of the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic, music director of Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, New York Chamber Symphony, Mozart Festival, Seattle Symphony, Tokyo Bunkamura, with the Tokyo Philharmonic, and lots of other positions. And now we are talking here at the Eastern Music Festival, where I've been for the last 13 years as music director of this great festival and school in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Certainly enjoyed watching you conduct here over the past 12 seasons. My wife is a member of your orchestra. It's quite an honor. So I know that you come from a musical family. And so if you could tell me a little bit about your origin story, how you started playing the trumpet, and sort of how you got from young man in New York to the New York Philharmonic, and then, of course, to the conducting career.
Well, my family was musical, but they weren't musicians. Mm-hmm. So my parents were both medical doctors. Mm-hmm. And they were from Austria. My mother was from Vienna. My father was from a suburb of Vienna called Mödling. Mm-hmm. And they came to the United States in 1939. It's a long, involved story, which is not relevant for today, as it may be. And they brought my sister, I have two older sisters, and me up in a way that was consistent with the way they were brought up, which meant at the age of 5 we started playing the piano. We all did. And we all went to concerts, and we were lucky. We lived just outside New York City. So we went to the New York Philharmonic, New York City Ballet, New York City Opera. We plays, musicals. I mean, they just took us. Culture was part of the fabric of their lives. And then, so that was when I was 5. And then when I was 7, I wanted to play the trumpet, but I was too young. And so when I was 8, I was allowed to play, because in school they wouldn't allow you to play at 7. But 5th grade, everybody starts playing. And most kids did. Trumpet was what I wanted, and I worked very hard. By the time I was 12, I decided to be a musician. That's what I wanted to be. Then I went to Performing Arts High School in New York, School of Performing Arts, great high school, great education. And the summer of just when I finished high school, and I was about to go to Juilliard, I auditioned for the American Brass Quintet, which I got in. And I spent 7 years there, and I spent 7 years working with Stokowski and the American Symphony, and doing a lot of what they call freelancing. So I played extra with the Met and the Chamber Music Society and the Philharmonic and the City Opera and so forth. And then I took my teacher's place. William Bacchiano was my teacher, and I was 24. I auditioned for the Philharmonic, and I got the job. Then I spent 4 years there, and then I became a conductor. as you can imagine, it's not. You just don't one day say, "Okay, now I'm a conductor." It's a process, and you have to wean yourself of one career and, in fact, start another career. And it's not. You'd think, well, you're still in the music world. Yes and no. It's a completely different world.
Yeah, sure.
Being a member of an orchestra and a player, and all of a sudden trying to become a conductor. And so that went pretty well. And so I became music director of the LA Chamber Orchestra. No, the first thing was the Waterloo Festival in New Jersey. Then it was the New York Chamber Symphony. Then it was Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. Then it was the Seattle Symphony and Mozart. All the things started happening. And you can read all about it in my new book.
I have read your book, and we'll talk about that for sure. I would really encourage my listeners to check that out, especially at the end. You have some really valuable advice about rehearsing that I'm going to touch on here as we go. So what attribute do you think has been most important to your success? If you could sort of pin it down.
It's easy. It's the same for everyone. You have to work really hard. I mean, you can't do it. It's never going to come to you. Nothing comes to anyone. You have to work for it.
Absolutely.
If you want to be a trumpet player, you got to practice. You have to study. You have to study the music. It's not just playing the instrument. You got to know the pieces. You have to understand sound. You have to understand. It's just there's so much depth of what you need to know. So number one, you have to be willing to work hard, really hard. Number two, you have to say yes. Someone says, "Oh, do you want to come and play in the Swiss band?" Yes. You want to play in the Henry Street Settlement Orchestra? Yes.
Yeah.
We're starting the New York Youth Symphony. Would you audition? Yes. You say yes to everything. I mean, of course, that's legal and good for you. But basically, you have to be a positive thinker. You have to. If you're negative in life, you will fail. It's like a guarantee.
Yeah.
So you have to have talent. You have to work hard. You have to say yes. You have to be a positive force and willing to do anything.
That's true.
So someone says, the chairs aren't in the right place on the stage. Well, I'll help put them in the right place. I'm not going, I don't touch the chairs. You have to be willing to do anything. And if you do all those things, most likely you'll be successful.
One of the things I've noticed as I've gotten older and wiser in my own life is that the more that I give, the more that comes back to me.
No question.
I think that as an audience of educators, though, I think most of my listeners understand that. That's what they're sort of doing.
Absolutely. I must say that because I was very involved with the Washington Music Educators Association when I was music director in Seattle. And I don't know of any more wonderful group of people who care deeply about the art, care deeply about music. Great educators. I mean, these are dedicated. I'm speaking to the choir now, of course, preaching to the choir, but boy, are they remarkable, men and women. Yeah,
they sure are. I love the band world. Just speaking off the record, I mean, it's been such a warm thing for me.
The band world's a remarkable world. It's a world that we, as orchestral musicians and orchestral conductors, don't know very well. It's very interesting. Most classical music enthusiasts go to classical orchestral concerts, some chamber music, some recitals. If you say, I was invited by Mike Colburn to go and conduct the Marine Band. So I was telling some friends in Seattle, I'm very excited. I've never conducted a professional band before. I'm going to conduct a Marine Band. And they said, a marching band? Everyone said the same thing. And there's nothing wrong with marching bands, don't get me wrong. But music lovers who go to my concerts don't even know what a band is.
Isn't that interesting?
And yet the band world is teaching hundreds of thousands of kids music, teaching them the discipline, the joys, the glories of music. And so as a result of that, I've just recorded in past February, March, 2 TV shows with the Marine Band.
Oh, that's great.
And we recorded a huge amount of educational material that people in the band world are going to love.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
So it's that'll be in the wintertime sometime. It'll be out. But it was really a fantastic experience. I want to educate people to the bands. Now, you don't need to be educated. Your audience doesn't need to be educated. The people at the University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, they don't need to be educated. But the sophisticated concert goers. They need to be educated.
Isn't that interesting? I would think that of all the bands, the Marine Band would be the one that would be known. But yet there are people who don't.
Well, no, it's not that they don't know. They know the Marine Band, but they know the Marine Band as the president's own, doing ceremonial stuff at the White House.
Playing Pomp and Circumstance.
Or playing at the inauguration, or playing for a ball, or playing when there's a dignitary there.
Right.
They don't think of it as concert music. And when you realize, as we all do that know the band world, that most of the music played is American contemporary music, 21st century music. I mean, you go to a band concert, it's hard not to hear a piece of Vincent Persichetti, or Vittorio Giannini, or whomever it may be.
Yeah. There's new music is deeply embraced by the band community, and in fact, it's one of the things I wanted to ask you. Is many of my guests before you have expressed that they're concerned that the band world rejects its masterworks too quickly, that the great pieces that are written get rejected. There's a churn in that world, and so I kind of wanted to ask you about that balance.
Well, look, you think about Copeland Emblems, right? And that was rejected. The bandmasters were very upset by that, I'm told. That some of them didn't even want to fulfill their commitment to the commission because they wanted to have El Sol en Mexico or Billy the Kid, and they got Emblems. Emblems is a great work, one of the great works for band, and it is now played all the time. I recorded it with a Marine Band. It did a lot of recordings of it. I mean, sometimes it takes a little longer. That's all. I mean, pieces of quality, even if they are not embraced the first day, if they're quality, they will be embraced. If they're not, they won't. So sometimes pieces that are not embraced right away deserve not to be embraced. Sometimes, eventually, they will be embraced. I mean, sometimes you get pieces that are hugely successful. I remember touring with the American Brass Quintet, and we used to do 3 programs. We did a program that had some difficult contemporary music on it. We did a well-rounded program, and we did a light program. And that year in the light program, we did a trio by Vaclav Nelibel. And it was something I heard on the radio in New York on WNCN, which doesn't exist anymore, classical station, and it was their announcement for the news or something. And it was a trio. So I listened. I said, wow, that's nice. What is that? I found out. I got the music. It didn't end up being my favorite piece because it has all this kind of kitschy stuff that I thought was kind of not high art. Anyway, but it was effective, and so we decided to program it on the light program. Every university picked that program. And so when I asked the band directors, why are you picking this program? Oh, because of the Nellie Bell. I said, who's Nellie Bell? I never heard of Nellie Bell. He said, I'm an orchestra man, right? Right. We in the orchestra world, we didn't even know he existed. Well, and he was the star in those days. Yep, sure. So this would have been in the late 60s. The star of the band world. I mean, it shows you the disconnect between the classical orchestral music world and the band world.
It's very true. Yeah. My first piece as a high school freshman in my high school band was a Nellie Bell piece. That's the first piece I remember.
And then the Texas Bandmasters Association commissioned Nellie Bell to write a concerto for brass quintet and band. And Nellie Bell decided he was going to become a modern composer and write a serial piece. It was one of those pieces that was not embraced by the band world and deserved not to be. Now, maybe it's better than I remember.
Well, that's interesting because I think people expect a certain thing from composers or even ensembles and performers. You expect a certain type of music, a certain performance practice.
You're absolutely right. You commission a piece by a composer. You base it on what they've given you before.
Right. I think it's important to articulate that to a composer, too. This is maybe tell them the pieces of theirs that inspired you to write that piece.
We like all these pieces. Let's not make this the cutting-edge new version of recreate yourself. Just continue for us. Then next time you can do something.
I can see you having that experience, though, because perhaps if you commission a composer and the opportunity to write for the Seattle Symphony came along, maybe that's like, oh, I have to do something special or bigger than what I've done before.
That's happened.
I'm sure.
And without success. And, what's interesting about audiences, you can build an audience over many years. You give them a piece that they really hate, and you can lose them pretty fast. Composers don't realize that. They think, why aren't you doing my music? Oh, well, it's because I respect my audience, and if I do it, they're never going to come back again. I mean, I'm exaggerating now, but you got to be a little careful. Besides the composers themselves, the audience is the most important thing we have. As a classical musician, without the audience, professional class, what do we have? I mean, educators are different, but in terms of, we need them. And so it's not to say we're not going to challenge them, but you better challenge them with quality.
Yeah, absolutely. As a composer of band music for kids, my audience are those kids.
Yeah.
The goal is to inspire those kids, to give them something. It's not going to be high art necessarily what the Seattle Symphony is playing, but it certainly matters to those kids.
Absolutely.
And they have to feel that they've done something.
Correct.
So
absolutely right.
It works. The audience just shifts.
That's right.
So
interesting.
Okay, so obviously you are a tremendous conductor. And so most of my listeners, I imagine, are band directors who conduct daily, but that might not be their main focus. Do you have sort of any hard-earned wisdom for conductors that maybe they can use to work with in their daily rehearsals?
You mean technically, musically, intellectually, in terms of leadership?
I'm not sure. I guess intellectually more, because I'm going to ask you about score preparation, because I think that's where it all starts.
Well, there's no question. It all starts with score preparation. I think. Basically, here at Eastern, we teach conducting, and so we have 9 conducting students, and there are lots of things. In principle, I teach them. Among them is you don't talk too much. Kids like to play. Professionals like to play. We like to play music. Yeah. We like to sit and play the pieces. You start lecturing. It won't be long before they stop listening to you. I think you have to, tremendous preparation. You have to decide what will fix itself and what needs to be fixed.
It's interesting.
And then the things that need to be fixed, you do in a succinct way. What I say to the conducting students here is, don't say the second sentence. Trombones, it's a little too loud. Could you be softer? Well, let me explain this further. You're in trouble. Now, if you have a poetic thing, say, the trombones, this is a magical moment. Please play softer. That's fine. But to say trombones, play softer. Now, this is a moment of great majesty. And, just
the musicians
clear.
have tuned out.
Yeah. And then you need to work it and know when to give up. You say, well, let's try it. No, it's not quite right. Let's try. No. Well, why don't you work on it? We'll try it again tomorrow.
Sure.
You don't beat it up.
Yeah.
Oh God, you do it over and over. I mean, it's really interesting how. But and then you have to have a feeling for a momentum of rehearsal. Sometimes it's going along and there's a mistake. You stop. You fix it. And then another mistake, and then you say to yourself, I'm stopping too much. It's getting really tedious for the orchestra. Let's play for a while.
One of the things I read in your book about rehearsal is that you like to, and I've seen it in rehearsals watching you, is that you like to run the piece without stopping at least once. And I'm curious about that practice.
Until dress rehearsal, which I do it again.
Yes.
In general, I like to run a piece. Now, if I'm going to an orchestra that I don't know, it takes them a while to get to understand what I'm doing. So where to put the notes when I give a beat. Everybody gives different beats. Everyone has different techniques. What I'm looking for, I'm looking to see how they respond to me. If I give a sign to be softer, are they going to actually play softer? Or are they going to completely ignore me? I mean, it goes both ways. So I have, as a guest conductor, play through a whole Brahms symphony, 45 minutes, without ever saying a word, just go through. And by the last moment, all of a sudden, the sound I'm looking for, the things I'm most interested in, they're starting to produce. So when I go back to the first movement, I don't have to stop and say a lot. In principle, it's nice for the conductor to know what's ahead and for the orchestra to know what's ahead. So for me, if I'm conducting a piece, let's say it's a 10-minute piece, and I go through it, and I hear a lot of mistakes, and I hear them all, and I know what's going on. So they're having a little problem with the rhythm, they're having a little problem with pitch, they're having a little problem. Whatever the problem is, I can evaluate it, and they can understand the piece a little better. I mean, one of the most important things that we need to do as conductors is make the piece familiar to the orchestra or the ensemble. Let's say you're conducting a high school band, and there's not a lot of preparation that they do. So they come to the first rehearsal. It's not like they practice for a month on the parts, And they're playing and they're doing things wrong and they're not together, and because they don't even know how the piece goes. Once they get to know how the piece goes, lots of things fix themselves. And then what's also interesting to me is that if they know that, I have to listen to the snare drum here because I'm playing with the snare drum, if they start to realize that, makes your life a lot easier. And then as you interpret the music, they buy into the interpretation, and then you can change your technique of conducting.
Right.
Because at the beginning, you have to be a time beater, especially with kids, right?
Yeah.
You gotta, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then eventually when they start to hear how it goes, whether you point it out or whether they just do it because they become familiar with it, you can change your technique and you can become more musical and you can become more inspirational than time beating. It's interesting because there are some people who believe that professional conductors conduct kids. Orchestra conductors conduct kids. It's going to be bad for your technique because you have to. Wrong. What you have to do is take your technique, make it rudimentary, and then as time goes on, go back to the normal way you conduct.
Sure.
And it works very well that way.
Sure.
But the key really is you want the musicians to know how the piece goes. Then you can accomplish a huge amount.
Yeah, absolutely. It's curious because I've had conductors in my time that did both. Run the piece all the way through, and then I had one conductor in college, notably, who never rehearsed the piece through. In fact, the first time we ever played the piece through might be the dress rehearsal. It might be on stage at the concert, and it was always a very disconcerting kind of experience.
Very hard. Now, the only exception for me is if it's a very difficult contemporary piece. If you play it through, sometimes it can sound so bad that the musicians get turned off and it gets hard to turn it back on.
Yeah, you mentioned a piece in your book. I won't mention...
It was a piece of George Pearl's in the Philadelphia Orchestra. It was when I learned that lesson. Because when it was over, they all hissed.
Boy.
Because they thought it was so terrible. And it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was my fault.
Pearl's challenging. His music is challenging.
He is, but I could have stopped after 20 bars.
Sure.
And fixed those 20 bars so that they know that there was meaning behind those notes. Rather than spend... whatever it was, 12 minutes, go through it, and it sounds terrible because it's being played so badly, because they have no idea what relates to what, and then they hate it, So that was a mistake I made.
Right.
And I don't. So with difficult new music, I rarely run through. I do sections. I'll run through a section and then go back and fix it.
Sure. So do you want to take a minute to talk about score preparation?
Well, everyone is curious about it, and everyone does it different ways.
Sure.
It depends. For me, of course, it depends on what I'm studying. If it's a piece that I know, I'm doing Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony. That's what I'm conducting this week. I have a DVD of it. You can see it on YouTube. You can watch my analysis of it on the Khan Academy. I have a CD of it. I probably performed it 40 or 50 times. Now, I don't have to do the meticulous preparation that I did the first time.
Sure.
First time, I look and I see every dot, every dash, every rest. When is there a rest? When is there not a rest? What is the primary voice? I do a kind of analysis. I don't personally analyze it in terms of, I don't write all the harmonic, I don't do harmonic analysis ever, because I believe harmonic analysis is in your ear. You hear the harmony. You don't have to know in Beethoven's sixth last movement that it's an augmented sixth chord.
Right.
You hear that, and that's your job, and you react to it. You don't have to actually say, this is augmented sixth, therefore it is a less secure.
Right.
Then you start to understand the themes. You start to understand the structure. It's very important to know where a movement is going, where a piece is going, and then you try to get to the essence of how do you get from A to Z. Where are you going? The theme comes in 3 times. Are you going to do it the same way 3 times? Are you going to do it a little differently? Are you going to? What are you going to do? How are you going to phrase that theme? What are the primary voices? What's the balance going to be like? This chord's interesting. The root and the fifth are very strong. The third is not doubled at all. I got to figure out a way to make sure it sounds like a real chord rather than a root and a fifth with the third being weak.
Right.
You look at every part.
Sure.
And you make believe you're the clarinet player or the trumpet player or whatever. How do I play that part? What's difficult about it? Where are the slurs? Where is it consistent? Is it inconsistent? Is the inconsistency good, or should it be consistent? What are the dynamics? What's the softest dynamic in the piece? 3 pianos. What's the loudest? 3 fortes. Okay. What's the gradations? Where are the crescendos? How long are the crescendos? Are they crescendos over a bar, or are they crescendos over 10 bars? Or, you just think of everything you can think of, and you read it. I mean, you read it over and over again. Now, if it's a piece I know, I don't have to do that. I can just go back to it. Now, what I do actually, I go and listen to my former performances.
Interesting.
So how did I do that 10 years ago? Oh, I don't like that. Or I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll do that again. Oh, yeah, I forgot I did that.
I like that. I like that.
So I go, now if it's, let's say I'm conducting, I don't conduct Rachmaninoff symphonies. I've never conducted a Rachmaninoff symphony. Okay. So let's say I'm going to do the Rachmaninoff third. Well, I apologize for saying this. I'll listen to a recording. Eugene Normandy, who I knew and I loved, I remember hearing him do the Rachmaninoff. Now, of course, I've heard it a lot, so I know it, but I'll listen to it. Because it just saves a lot of time.
Sure. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, I don't necessarily copy his interpretation or his tempos or anything else, but it gets me to a level of familiarity that's really nice.
Sure.
And then I'll move on and do my own. But much of it you can do just by reading, like you're reading a book. But then a little, it's nothing wrong. I mean, I say that, it was a trumpet player came to play for me, and he was playing the Herne Slavische Fantasie, which I recorded many, many years ago. And he's playing it, and it's very straight, not much is going on, and I start correcting this, and what about the phrase here? What do you think? Should it be a crescendo? Should you take a breath here? What should you do? We start discussing because he was doing nothing. And then I realized I was telling him how to play it the way I played it. So I said, look, you're not interpreting this piece at all. It's flat, and you're wasting your time and my time. Go home, listen to my record, copy it. Copy it 100%. Do it exactly my way. That's not going to be the way you're going to do it in the end. But then you have 2 ways. You have the way you're doing it now, which is a non-interpretation. And then you have my way, which is, let's call it an extreme interpretation. And now you have options. Oh, do I like the way Schwarz does it here? Or maybe not. What if I did that? It just opens up the world to you. Yeah. Sometimes you just need to see what the possibilities are.
Right, and you don't learn how to play different styles of music unless you listen all the time.
Well, you're a composer.
I listen every day.
And you listen to other people's music. That chord, I like that chord. I'll use that chord. I mean...
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not a composer who ever lived who doesn't do that or didn't do that.
In fact, when I didn't do that, that's when I was struggling as a composer, when the day I realized that, oh, wait a minute, there's this whole wealth of information out there that I need to learn.
And then you find your own way. You find your own voice.
Absolutely.
That's the idea. The idea is eventually you find your own voice, but you can't find your own voice if you don't have a voice.
We're building on a tradition.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Khan Academy, and so I was going to ask you about the All-Star Orchestra and the Khan Academy and what that is as far as and what it can be for music educators.
So my last couple of years in Seattle, I did a few TV shows that won Emmys, and they were part education and full concerts, but they were live concerts. One day we did a show without an audience so we could get the cameras to go anywhere. And It was the best show we ever did. I thought to myself, there's something in this. So when I left Seattle, or before I left, I decided, what's my next mountain to climb? What do I want to do? What's the most important thing to me, besides the music itself and the audience? It's exposure and education. So I want to expose more people to the great art that is part of our lives. And I want them to come backstage and say, I watched your stuff on the Khan Academy and I really love that performance, rather than come backstage, which so many people do to this day. I don't know anything, but I thought it was really nice. I'd much rather have them say, I know a lot and I thought it was really nice.
Yeah.
So the idea is expose people. There are a large majority of our country that's never heard a Beethoven symphony. I mean, not a few people. A large majority. We're reaching in our world, 5% of the population, if that much. Yeah. I mean, it's terrible. We have to do better. So said, okay, what can I do? Well, what does everybody have? Everybody's a television set. And what does everybody get? Public television. Mm-hmm. It's not cable. Public television can be on cable. It's not.
Right.
And I said, okay, I'm going to do TV shows, not concerts, TV shows. They're going to be an hour long. It's going to be a little education. Not a lot, just a superficial education. And 1 hour. No audience. Mm-hmm. Cameras can go anywhere you want. So that's good. Now, who's going to play? Well, if I hire the New York Philharmonic, I have to deal with the New York Philharmonic rules. They're not bad rules, but they're extensive. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a New York show. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, maybe a musician or an audience in San Francisco says, I don't want the New York show. I want my own show. Mm-hmm. I think to myself, why don't we create an all-star orchestra and try to get every orchestra, every professional major orchestra in the country represented. Mm-hmm. Then we create these shows. We of course, go by the union rules, but I'm going to pay double what the union, because these are all such special musicians. Mm-hmm. And so I did. I got musicians from 30 orchestras around the country. We come together. So everyone says, how could you do that? How is it possible? Ensembles take many, many years to build. Yes and no. Mm. That's my job. Right. I knew every player. I picked every player. Mm-hmm. And on a rare occasion when I couldn't, I went to the concertmaster, David Kim, and said, David, I need another violin. You know what I like. You know what I care about. Who? I took that person. So we have this orchestra, and we've done now 16 television shows. Mm-hmm. We've won 6 Emmys. Mm-hmm. We've won the Deems Taylor Award for ASCAP. And that's just the icing, right? The icing is hour-long TV shows of the great masterpiece, a lot of contemporary music. The real purpose is the education now. So you take all that material you have and you build it into an educational platform, which I've done in the Khan Academy. So Khan is Khan. It's mostly math and science. Most kids in high school know it because they use it.
Right.
But they've never had music before. Mm-hmm. So we do all the music for the Khan Academy. It's in its infancy.
Sure.
We do note reading. We do rhythm. We do the instruments of the orchestra. We do analyzation of the masterpieces. Plus, you can hear them. You can hear every piece from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. We've reached now 6 million people with the Khan Academy. I mean, it's a dream for me. And it grows by about 250,000 a month.
Wow.
So, I mean, in your life, when you want to make a difference, and for me, I leave Seattle after being involved with the orchestra for 28 years, music director for 26. And I said, I want the new mountain. I want to expose people. I want to educate people. And all of a sudden, 85% of the public radio TV stations are airing our shows. 6 million so far are listening to our educational stuff. Now I'm doing the 2 band shows. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a piano platform, which I think Long is going to do, to teach piano in a way through the piano educators. What do you need to know? What do your kids need to know?
Right.
Fundamentals. How do you sit at the bench? How do you? Where should you put your elbows? Should your fingers be flat or rounded? But then you have someone like Long teaching it, who is very articulate and a great artist and a great pianist. Boy, that's exciting. I mean, the possibilities are tremendous. And for what we do, we are not the primary educator. Very important. We are supplemental educators.
Sure.
So what we can do, I mean, for example, there was a conductor at USC who was doing Firebird. Mm-hmm. And he noticed on the Khan Academy that, or was it on YouTube? I can't remember. You can look at any section of the orchestra in the Firebird. So you could look at just the first violins, you could look at the second violins, the violas, the cellos, whatever. So we had a camera on each section. Mm-hmm. So he said to the kids, go on, I think it was YouTube, and for a violin, just click on the violins and watch what they do, what fingerings they do, what bowings they do. Mm-hmm. Become familiar with it from that point of view. I mean, we're not supplementing what he's going to do, but we're not going to eliminate, but we're going to supplement. And that's what we feel about. So you have a kid in your band who has trouble reading music.
Right.
He just can't get it. he can go on my learning to read music and learning about clefs and ledger lines, and he can listen to the same thing 100 times over and over again until he says, "Oh yeah, in treble clef, there's a ledger line below the staff is a C. I got it now." I mean, again, many music educators are using it. Not as many as I would think, because a lot of them don't know about it yet.
Sure,
but it's making a huge difference. And again, when I say it's in its infancy, with intervals, I got up to minor seconds and I stopped because, how can I say this delicately? It costs a lot of money, and I don't. I'm free, but I have a great video guy who needs to get paid. And
sure,
I mean, so as I raise money, I do more.
Sure, I understand.
So we probably have, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 lessons, maybe more, but we could have 1,000.
Sure, absolutely.
And I love doing it. It's fun for me.
Yeah, well, I will definitely link it in the show notes and make sure that word gets out as best as I can help you get that out.
Thanks.
Okay, so we should probably come up with my sort of closing questions that I ask all my guests. And so I'm going to ask you first, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self if you could go back in time?
The great thing about being 20 is being 20.
Absolutely.
You can run, you can play, you can burn the candle at both ends. You can be exposed to the great music for the first time. I mean, wow, how thrilling.
Oh, yeah.
But the downside of being 20 is how little you know. And it's especially bad if you think you know something. Because you don't know why. I mean, I'm going to be 70, and I realize how little I know, and how much I study all the time, how much I grow, and how much I learn. I guess in a musical way, I was pretty lucky. All my dreams came true.
Yeah,
I worked really hard. I wanted my early teacher was a guy named Ronnie Anderson, a wonderful trumpet player. He played the American Brass Quintet. He left the American Brass Quintet. I joined the American Brass Quintet. My next teacher, William Vacchiano, I wanted to be in the New York Philharmonic. He retired. I got that. I wanted to be a conductor. I got a bunch of orchestras. Along the way, there are things socially and personally. Of course, you want to do different.
Sure.
But on the musical level, I feel pretty happy with the trajectory of my life. At the time, it seemed like it was in slow motion. As I look back on it, it was like an accelerator throughout.
I hear a lot of my guests say, be patient, take your time.
And have perseverance.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Oh, it's absolutely true. Absolutely. And you have to stick with it. You have to believe, you have to stick with it, you have to study, you have to analyze, and you have to deal with perception too. It's interesting. I have this theory about perception. There are 3 kinds of perception. What you think of yourself, what everyone else thinks of you, and what's real.
Isn't that interesting?
And so what you try to do is make them one. I think I'm a great trumpet player. The audience thinks I'm a great trumpet player, the public. And in fact, it's true. That's great. I think I'm a great trumpet player. The audience thinks I'm mediocre. And reality is I'm lousy. Well, that's not so hot.
Right. Right.
You try to merge those 3.
Right.
And you have to keep analyzing who you are, what you're accomplishing, what you try to accomplish throughout your life. It never stops.
That's terrific advice. Terrific advice.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Big questions. Simple questions, but big questions. I always ask all my guests what's their favorite work for wind ensemble. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions. What's your favorite work that you've conducted, or if you had to go back one last time, what would it be?
For wind ensemble?
No, for orchestra.
Oh, that's easy. Mahler 8th and Schoenberg Gurlieder.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I did the Gurlieder once with the LA Philharmonic many years ago. It was one of the great experiences I ever had. It's it's 140 musicians plus 7 soloists.
Yeah,
a huge chorus, and you rarely get it. And Mahler 8th is very similar. And I've only done it once. My recording of Mahler 8th is one of my favorites. It was a private issue from Seattle. I'm sure you can get it. But so those works are the ones that, if someone said to me, you can conduct any piece you want, what do you want? I'd pick one of those 2.
Wow. That was such a quick answer. Usually I get a lot of hemming and hawing.
Well, it's not, you didn't say to me, thank goodness, what's your favorite piece?
Right.
Oh, God, who knows?
Right.
I mean, Do I love conducting Brahms symphonies? Absolutely. But in terms of opportunities that you often don't have, those are the pieces that I rarely get to do.
Sure. The forces are so vast in those pieces.
Unfortunately, it makes it expensive. So much of what we do in our lives, unfortunately, is based on money. And
absolutely.
You can accomplish so much, but it costs so much you can't. It's pain.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember being told as a young composer, don't write for more than 3 winds. You'll never get it played. You already have a very slim chance. You're going to maybe have no chance at that point.
I'll tell you a story that happened just recently. I'm doing a concert with the Juilliard Orchestra in October of 3 Juilliard composers. David Diamond, Jacob Druckmann, and William Schumann. David Diamond taught there for well over 20 years. Jacob Druckmann taught there for well over 20 years. And William Schumann was the president of the school. Lots of hooks. David was our closest friend of our family. The Druckmann Viola Concerto was written for my father-in-law, and he premiered it with the New York Philharmonic. And William Schumann was one of my dearest friends, and I recorded all of his symphonies, and he was a former president of Lincoln Center and chairman, president of Lincoln Center, and president of the Juilliard. So the Diamond Symphony is for large forces. Quadruple winds, 6 horns, 4 trumpets. And there is a reduced version that he hated. But he did it because the publisher Schirmer said, look, 6 horns, quadruple winds, forget it. He redid it for 4 horns, triple winds. I think he kept the 4 trumpets. But he was very unhappy. But he did it. And at Juilliard, they said, would I do the reduced version? I said, no. David didn't. They hated it. This is Juilliard. You have players.
Exactly.
I understand they had a lot of scheduling issues. And they were wonderful. They said, sure, of course we'll do it. We didn't realize that it's such a big deal. But, whoever gave you that advice, triple wins,
Yeah. Even double wins is better.
Double wins is better.
So it's interesting. That leads me to a question just as an offshoot. Here at the Eastern Music Festival, there's terrific students. And I notice you do many large force works. Is that for that reason? To involve those students? Yeah, that's what I figured.
Someone said to me the other night, my first clarinet player, Shannon Scott, great clarinet player, she said, we've never done the Beethoven Sixth. I said, Shannon, the Beethoven Sixth is for double winds plus piccolo, 2 trombones, 2 trumpets, and 4 horns. No percussion, just timpani. And it takes, 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Really? You want me not to have all those trombones? We have 9 trombones, and I'm only using 2. Right. We have all those percussion, and they can't play at all. We try to balance it so that we on occasion can do a Mozart or a Haydn or a Beethoven. Sure. But the big pieces generally are big.
Yeah.
Because we want to use the kids. They want to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is it a terrible thing that they play the Rite of Spring? Not so bad.
No. For some, it might be their only opportunity.
It's 8 horns. Well, but we did this year. We did the Bruckner Eighth 8 horns, and 4, including 4 Wagner tubas. What an experience! Right. What youth symphony? What college orchestra does the Bruckner Eighth Symphony? You come to a place like Eastern, and that was opposite Rite of Spring because Bruckner Eighth has very little percussion, cymbal crash, triangle note or something, So you have all the percussion playing in Senza Mayad and the Rite of Spring. We balance it all. But yes, exactly. We try to use the big forces. I try to do big force stuff with the festival professionals so that we can get kids playing with us too. What a great experience that is. So the first week we did Mahler first. Had a bunch of kids playing with us because we carry triple winds and so forth. Sure. So you need a 4th wind and a student plays. So I try very hard, and Jose Luis Novo and Grant Cooper, my resident conductors, we spent a lot of time coming up with the repertoire that we want to do that's best for the kids and uses the forces. And there's a lot of lobbying going. We did a Bruckner Eighth, which I was very hesitant to do because of then Jose Luis said, great, I'll do the Rite of Spring. It was okay. So Grant Cooper's already lobbying for another Bruckner Symphony. Whatever, come on, we just did the 8th. Come on, give me let me take a deep breath here for a minute.
Yeah, it's a terrific festival.
Thank you.
And it's wonderful. I wanted to tell you that the Conductor's Concert Sunday was the best yet.
Wasn't it?
It was great.
So
That's
what
terrific.
we're talking about, we have these 9 conductors, very gifted, and they do a lot of conducting. I mean, the main thing that they need, that they want, is to conduct. They want to conduct. And yes, they want us to tell them, teach them, but what they really want to do is conduct.
Sure.
And so they conduct the students, they conduct the lab orchestra, they conduct the band, and they do one concert with the professionals, the festival orchestra, and we do a concert of overtures.
Sure.
Traditional overtures, whether it be William Tell or Freischutz or Egmont or whatever. And this year's Roman Carnival we did, I mean, the kids, I thought, thank you for saying that, they really rose. You know, what's interesting for me, you see someone come in week 1, and then in week 4, you see the tremendous growth that they have made.
Yeah.
Just because there are 3 of us analyzing, looking over their shoulders every day. I mean, we do score seminar. That's what I do. You know, what is it in the piece that you need to look for? What are the performance issues? What is going to go wrong? What could go wrong? We do seminars with the librarian, with the concertmaster, with the artistic administrator. We do all of that. Then we do 2 lab orchestra sessions a week. They then assist us in the sectionals that the student orchestras do. I mean, it's just a huge amount of repertoire that they cover, and with 3 of us looking over the shoulder at all times.
Yeah, that's great. So do you have a favorite work for wind ensembles, or do you have one that you...
Well, you know, I've only really done 2 concerts with wind ensemble. I've done, and I mean, I've done a couple more than that, but I've done 2 that are very memorable, both with the Marine Band. And so I picked pieces that I loved and I remembered from playing the band. But also, you know, I did the Hindeman Symphony this time, and I think it's a magnificent work. Hard.
Really hard.
It's hard not only, but it's hard musically.
Yeah.
A lot of, you know, I listened to a couple of recordings of it as, you know, to acquaint myself with it before I decided to program it. And I felt that they didn't quite get it. I apologize, but I'm not talking about my performance now. But just in terms of phrasing, in terms of structure, in terms of length of notes, and so I did it this time, and I just loved doing it. It was really fun for me. Yeah. I have a couple of band pieces that I like doing, so I enjoy that. I've enjoyed Above and Beyond is one that I've done. And it's been recorded a few times, and I really enjoy it.
Who is that, Above and Beyond?
That's by me.
Oh, by you? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I wrote 2 band pieces, Above and Beyond, both from Marine Band, Above and Beyond, and Rudolph and Jeanette. I think they're both good. They're tricky. The Above and Beyond is a little harder than Rudolph and Jeanette, but they're both good band pieces.
Are the recordings available?
Yes. The recording of Above and Beyond, there are 2 of them. I did one of the Marine Band, and then this wonderful conductor in North Texas did one. And then the Lieutenant Colonel Fettig did the world premiere of Rudolph and Jeanette, and that's going to be on coming out in October is a 30 CD kind of birthday present that Naxos is giving me. And one of the CDs is only my music. My
cool.
Trio and,
cool.
And my 2, and Rudolph and Jeanette, I think.
Okay.
Not Above and Beyond. So, or maybe both. I don't remember now.
So do you want to tell listeners about your book?
Well, I think for musicians, it's a really interesting book. I mean, it goes through my childhood, and that's maybe for a musician, it's not so interesting. I might be more interesting for a general public, but I talk a lot about each orchestra. So I do a whole section on the New York Chamber Symphony, a section on mostly Mozart, a section on Seattle, a section on Liverpool, a section on a lot about repertoire, a lot about advice, little anecdotes about advice, about rehearsals, or about scores, or about pieces. I'm very happy with it. I think it came out. I think it came out really well. And for musicians, I mean, it's not. You know, some friend of mine said, "Oh, actually, my son works at Knopf or one of the big publishers. We should have put your book out there." I said, "No.
It's through Hal Leonard, right?
It's Hal Leonard." And I said, "This is a music book.
Sure.
This is not going to sell 300,000 copies.
Right. Right.
This is not a book for Simon and Schuster."
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled with Amadeus Press through Hal Leonard. They did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. I read about halfway through, and then I read the endings before we talked. So I knew your tips. Yeah, so I'm going to finish it up before we leave.
Great. I'm happy you like it.
All right, Jerry, as our last question, what challenges do you think we're facing as music educators and musicians moving forward, and how can we meet them as teachers?
I guess the biggest challenge is relevancy. Everybody, is music relevant? Well, that's a ridiculous question. Mm-hmm. Music is a part of life. It's a part of our souls. It's part of who we are as a culture, as a civilization. I think what I've been doing lately is not talking about how great the music is, but rather talk about how great it is for education to learn music. In other words, if you go to someone and say, "Oh, you should really know Beethoven because it's important culturally and artistically in society as a civilized world," that doesn't go over so well because you don't make a living because you know Beethoven.
Right.
But if you study the clarinet, you'll be more focused. You'll do better in school. Mm-hmm. You'll have better grades. You'll hang out with different kind of people. Yeah. And you'll graduate, and you'll probably go to college if you have an interest. That resonates. So my push has now been how music education is going to save, how music is going to save our education system. Mm-hmm. Every school that I know that has a major music program, the kids do better in everything.
They do.
No exceptions. There's so many studies now. So I hate to say that we need to promote that as a reason for everyone to study music, because I don't think that's the main reason.
Right.
On the other hand, it really is true. I mean, I conduct, on occasion an all-state or an all-Northwest or something like that. And I ask the kids, how many of you plan on going to college? Everybody.
Yeah.
They all go to college. Everyone. Now, it doesn't mean they have to. I mean, college isn't for everybody. You know that.
Right.
But still, they do so much. I mean, the famous Nashville story of studying music for a couple of years, and the graduation rate went from 60% in 4 years to 92%, just because of music. I mean, we all know it's a given. And so, and of course, then the other thing is what you guys do anyway. It's about loving music. Yeah, you're disciplined, you have to do this, but it's, that old Music Man thing isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
The Music Man, he was successful not because he was a music educator, but because he had a passion for music. And we all have to always remember, and we do. I mean, music educators, we always remember why we're there. We're there because we love it, and because we want to instill these kids with. I remember with the love of music. I remember as a kid, the conductors I loved the most weren't necessarily the best conductors. Now, as I look back, but they were the ones that had the enthusiasm.
Yeah, absolutely.
The passion, and even if their interpretations, as I look back on them, were kind of too slow or didn't matter. I didn't know that as a kid. All I know is, wow, how thrilling this is.
You love music because of that experience.
Yeah. And I think music educators do that. I mean, they sure do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, music has value in and of itself, and that kids, if exposed to music, can catch that love, and they don't have to become professionals.
Well, as we know, 94% of kids who play music do not become professionals.
Right.
Thank goodness.
No kidding.
We have enough professionals. That's not a problem. The problem, it's so funny. Everybody's so interested in helping the next Leonard Bernstein or the great all-American youth orchestra.
Right.
I don't care about that. I care about the audience. I care about educating kids so that music will be part of their lives. We're always going to have great players.
Well, we're also educating our audience.
Of course.
So
you look, if in high school you're teaching music appreciation, say somebody's 17, well, in 15 years, they're 33 and they're going to a concert.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a quick turnaround.
I think that, I first started listening to classical music when I was 14 or 15, high school band. I was a trumpet player. I listened to Wynton Marsalis's recording of The Height and the Hummel, that disc.
I sure do.
And I remember listening to that thinking, oh my goodness, this is amazing, remarkable. And that began what has become my life. But even if I hadn't become a professional, I would still love music because of that.
That's right.
So there's no question.
That's right. Absolutely. Great. Well, great to talk to you. It's just a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I really appreciate the time. And, it's been great.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.